Mark Helm joins me here today. You could learn what him and his team is up to by heading over to creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. Creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. No, we're going to be talking about self storage and how you can create wealth. So, really appreciate your time here today, Mark.
And it's great to be here, Jack. Listen to a lot of your episodes.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that. Sometimes you wonder how many people are out there listening.
So you have a great way of kind of getting in someone's world and bringing a lot out. Usually doesn't get brought out. So
Well, with that, let's get into your world a little bit. Like, I hate to have you go from the beginning, but I'm always fascinated to see how people found in their way into their particular real estate investing niche. How did you find your way to self storage?
I have done a few single family home projects, but I was not very good at it. I didn't really get to it that much. But I worked most of my life like a commercial real estate agent. I was a commercial real estate agent in Louisville, Kentucky, and primarily in the office sector, although I wasn't like limited to that. But I ended up forming a office management company, and I had a list of buyers. I would sell office buildings to this group, and then we would manage it for them, lease it for them, kind of reposition the building, ultimately sell the building for them. So I went through a long process of getting a CCIM designation. That's just a designation in the commercial real estate industry. And as soon as, like, within 2 weeks of getting that, which was 1995, I got a call from the acquisition director of a REIT in the self-storage space. And at the time, I was this big, powerful commercial real estate agent, wore a coat and tie every day and had real fancy financial analysis software, and we managed office buildings. And I thought the storage business was a simple little business for simple little people. Went out with this guy to show him storage opportunities as a real estate agent in our market. And it didn't take me long to see what self storage really was. I had also done a lot of leasing of flex space at the time, which is basically the same kind of construction, steel wall, concrete floor. And in that day and age, in our market, the warehouse portion of flex space was getting about $3.50 or $4 a foot. And when I went out with the storage person, what I saw was the same building, but then getting $9 to $10 a foot. There were no tenant improvements. There were no toilets to fix. Once I saw what it was and saw how they analyzed it, I thought this is something I could do. I was making good money at the time, but my lifestyle also cost a lot at the time. And I was scared to get in office, and I'd done a few single family homes, but wasn't very good at it, didn't really like it much, especially didn't like the eviction process. But I saw that storage. I said, no, I can do that. So that's how I got in it. Took me a while to figure out how to do it. But when I really saw what it was, I fell in love with it.
Yeah, that'd be something to explore there a little bit too. Is you're a successful commercial real estate broker, but I think it's really interesting that we don't see more real estate agents get into real estate investing. I mean, they have to be helping these investors quite often and actually seeing this activity. You'd think we'd see more people from that
Well,
profession.
you do see some, but I was in the office building. So here's what I saw in the office building. We were actually fairly good at the management part. In other words, when you're managing real estate for somebody, in essence, you're in the tenant retention business. That's your job. We had 87% tenant retention in our office buildings. Even then, we had budget back in the mid 90s, $5 a square foot or so to renew a lease. We got a fee to renew it. Very often there was paint and carpet that had to be redone to renew it. And of the, 14 to 15% of people who leave, I mean, it was nothing to spend $15, $20 a square foot back then to get space repurposed to generate a new cash flow. So we have great NOIs, net operating incomes, income minus operating expenses, moving up. But very often the owners of those office buildings would be cleaning up cash at the end of the year and have negative distributable cash because of all the stuff that happened below capital improvements, commissions, below the net operating income line. You don't have any of that in storage. So that's why I fell in love with it. Definitely didn't want to own a lot of office. And I didn't want to own a lot of apartments because maybe not the same as office, but you have the same thing. You've got carpets, appliances, painting, all of that. And I was real slow to get in it. And I'm glad I waited to really dive in with both feet till I saw an asset class I could really get hold of and run with. And that was storage because small, very small, 12, 15 cents per square foot per year reserve fund literally take care of all the capital expenses you'll have usually during the hold of that asset. And other than your loan payment, there's really no friction against your net operating income. Reserve, loan payment, the rest is distributed cash.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of get into this because of when people get into real estate investing, they're trying to get the romanticism around passive income. But you've painted a picture where it kind of depends on the degree. There's no real passive income in our world. I mean, you're talking about single family homes and apartment buildings. There is a lot of work. I don't think
There
people
is.
realize that.
There are ways to be passive, and that's typically to become a investor in syndications, where you want to get in self-storage space, you give somebody done it in the past. There's a lot of good syndicators and sponsors out there. You can do that, invest money, but you're just usually one of many owners in it, and it is passive income. So I took this readout and really got excited about it and looked at it and studied it. But the problem was I didn't have any money. I wasn't strong enough financially to sign on a loan. These loans had one or two zeros more than anything I'd ever done before. So I had no money, no ability to do any loans. But the one thing I could do is I could find deals. I took my strength, then organized partners and investors around that and came out, I think I did my first self-storage deal in 1999.
Okay. Well, may I ask, like, how did you didn't have any money, and that's going to be a lot of people's situation, right? They're trying to get
Mhm.
into something like this. They're trying to get into their first investment. You found other people's money to help with that first investment. But how did you establish your credibility even with your network to make sure that you knew what you were doing and this was a good deal?
I studied, I worked as a real estate agent with buyers. I would help them find the deal and analyze deals. When I was working with the REITs, I got their spreadsheets on how they did it. I was at the time using pretty sophisticated financial analysis software. It was called Argus, still is. REITs use it today in the retail and office space, apartments, just a lot. What I saw was this acquisition director for storage REIT. Now here it is, the REIT's top of the food chain. He's running around in jeans and a t-shirt with this simple little Excel sheet. I ended up taking that Excel sheet over time and expanding it and turning it more into something I was familiar with 10-year cash flows and internal rates of return and stuff like that, and began to develop that. And I actually have a software program now called Storage World Analyzer, which is a cloud-based self-storage only financial analysis software that's kind of a result of that spreadsheet. But I was able to work with buyers and help them look at deals, project income, and see what the risk rewards were, that type of thing. And so I'd done a lot of brokerage side transactions and learned a lot and got to see how these assets performed over time. Then that gave me the confidence to find a deal on my own and put it together. Now, I had not managed and didn't run. I had no operating expense history to lean back on, but I took industry averages. I got the Storage World Almanac and saw on average in the South, but the taxes were percent of operating expenses were taxed. I used industry averages till I'd done enough deals to have my own averages. I knew who our customer base was at the time. I knew that women made 62% in that day and age of all the decisions to sell storage. I knew a lot about the industry when I first went out and put my first deal together.
So, what type of market do you typically buy in these days?
Well, it's hard to do. It's hard to sit in your backyard. If your backyard is so, I'll answer the first question. I had worked my entry point into storage was working with REITs, and I saw how REITs think about storage and what they look for and what kind of returns they get and that type of thing. So when I did my first deal, my whole goal at the time was to find mom and pops, and storage is still a pretty fragmented industry. But what I mean by that is today, 60% of all self-storage facilities in the US are owned by somebody who just owns one. Now, when I first got going, REITs accounted for, let's say, 15 to 18%. Now they're close to 30% of the market share. So there's consolidation going on, and that's frankly good for us. But what I saw was that REITs pay the most. REITs and institutional buyers, funds, people who raise a lot of capital and then go out and buy storage, they pay the most. So my goal was to find mom and pop facilities that I could expand or bring up to quote institutional grade standards, run them for a few years, stabilize the cash flow, and then at that point I would refinance it and give my investors who came along with me a good boost, and or we'd sell it to a REIT. And that was our plan. That's what I did for years. I looked for properties where REITs are, markets where they are or soon going to be. But that was only my business plan. There's a lot of great business plans out there. I know I work with people and coach and consult them, and their strategy is they'll buy small mom and pop facilities and automate, turn them from having a manager on site to not having a manager on site, and everything's auto and done online or with somebody's phone. So there's a lot of good strategies out there. That was just mine. Today, I'm finding the opportunities are more in the second, third tier markets where REITs, they may or may not be, but with a lot of what's going on in the space today, a lot of the pricing strategies that are currently going on in the self-storage space, I find being where I'm not competing with the majority being REITs is a good place to be right now. So that's currently what we're doing. You design your strategy around what's going on in the market.
Sure. Well, you're kind of teeing me up for a couple of the next questions here. But first of all, can you give me an example? What is a second or third tier market?
Well, we've done so. Let's just take Houston, Texas, for example, big city, three beltways around it. We're out past the third beltway. That would
Okay.
be example. Next county or two counties over. I love that because you're still part of a large MSA, but you're not, in the heart of the MSA. City towns like Pensacola. I mean, there's a million of them out there. I would call Louisville, Kentucky like a tier two type market. I don't want to say rural. We don't want to be in too small an area, but I'm not scared of quote rural markets. I hopefully am near an MSA and that rural area is part of an MSA, or I'm looking for population. So when we're currently looking, so what happened is I got involved in storage early, at the beginning of the storage story in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then we all know what happened in 2008, right?
Bit of a hiccup there.
Yeah, I had was in the storage business at the time because I didn't earn a real estate commission for 18 months in the commercial space. There was no commercial financing, but I was in the storage business. I survived. And what happened was in the recession, there were three kind of shining stars in the commercial real estate income world. One was medical office, two was student housing, three was self storage. Now, medical office, even back then, was 250, $300 a foot. Student housing is like resorts, so it's easy to get 300 to 400 a square foot. And back then, institutional grade self storage you could build at $50 a square foot. So money started flooding into the storage space after the recovery of the '08 recession. And what happened was a lot of storage got built. There were a lot more financing options than we used to have. A lot of storage got built. So today, the I spend a lot of time looking at the trade area and the market area to determine the supply demand. And then whenever we control an opportunity, whether it's land or an existing self-storage building or an empty building that we're going to convert to self-storage, we'll get an independent third-party feasibility report that will fairly accurately indicate what the supply demand is for that trade area. The good news about storage is, unlike any other asset class, in most parts of the country, I can send a drone up and can see my customer base. In our portfolios, about 86% of our customers live within 3 to 4 miles of our facility. Now, the more rural you get, the bigger your market area is. But people rent storage where they live and they work, unlike, office building where you can drive across town or even city to city. A lot of people in Louisville work in Frankfort, Kentucky. So even retail, a lot of people will drive across town to go to a newer shopping center or a mall, the thing. With storage, your customer base, for the most part, is like right there. And so we can quantify what the customer base is. We can see what their average income is, how much disposable income they have. And it's fairly easy to quantify what the current supply is based on how many storage units there are. In our industry, the main number right now, although it's probably beginning to change some, is square foot per capita. In other words, on average, every market's a little different, but on average, you got about 8 square feet of self storage per person in a trade area. That's equilibrium. If you're 15 or 20 square feet per person in that trade area, odds are you're overbuilt. If you're 4 square feet per capita in that area, the odds are there's unmet demand. So you can quantify that fairly easily. So our investors going in, when we know what we're doing, we have independent third party reports validating what I found during the due diligence process.
I appreciate you sharing those statistics, and it's especially interesting. I live just outside of Fargo, North Dakota, in Minnesota. We have a lot of rural area here. And lately, I've been surprised at the number of self storage being built like out in the middle of nowhere. It's just kind of surprising. I'm thinking that they might be trying to tap into like boat storage or something, getting to the lakes and the lake. But it's just perplexing the number that's being built.
Yeah,
So,
it's very interesting how it goes up and what you see. And then I've seen a lot of facilities that have never been built. I'm not saying that's what's going on where you are, but I've actually seen those. But a boat and RV is a big thing right now. We're doing a large boat and RV development in South Carolina right now, primarily boat and RV, canopy. The further north you go, you pretty much either have to do surface or enclosed boat and RV. But
mhm.
in the South, you can do canopy a boat and RV, really create a Class A type facility with dump stations, wash stations, dog runs, ice machines, places to wash your RV off, and it's less expensive per square foot to develop right now storage, and there is a huge demand for it. I mean, huge. Right now, if I'm reading industry statistics right, there's probably 30-40% more supply manufactured in the RV world every year going out. It's a huge business right now. Somebody spends, $100,000, $200,000 for a toy. They want it in a very nice place, very safe place, and you don't ever have to worry about them not paying their rent.
Right.
They tend to
Just
be really
remind everybody.
sticky.
Yeah, they're pretty sticky. They don't want to lose that boat. Creating wealth storage through creating wealth through self-storage.com. Creating wealth through self-storage.com is where you're going to find a lot more information, as well as links to YouTube and some training material. We're going to stay right there because we're going to be talking about a few other topics, including the economy, trends you might be seeing, and the big one, your most expensive mistake along the way. But before we do, I want to remind everybody to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. But more importantly, if you found some value in what we're talking about, do us a quick favor and share this with one of your real estate investing friends. That does go a long way. So, Mark, could we start with the economy? You've seen you mentioned 2008, but I'm sure you've seen quite a bit now over the course of time. Where do you see the economy shaking out, and what should we maybe prepare ourselves for?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but here's what I can tell you. There's going to be recessions in the future, and there's going to be boom times in the future. The economy cycles. As we all know, there's 4 phases of a real estate cycle. There's typically 4 phases of an economic cycle. There's 4 seasons in a year on our planet. Things are constantly changing. So there's always been challenges. People ask me, boy, it's the best time to get in storage. I wish I had gotten in 10 years ago when I first started thinking about it. Well, sure. The best time was 10 or 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. But there's always challenges. Back when I first got going, the challenges financing was a real challenge. I mean, huge. Most banks didn't want a loan on self-storage. I can remember sitting with the president of a local bank saying, "We'll never loan on it. It's a specialty built product. If you lose all your tenants, which never do, lose all your tenants, what would I do with that building?" Well, I ended up borrowing millions from him later on in life for self-storage. But there's always challenges. Here's our challenges today. Now, I don't know if we're going to get better in the next 4 years or if it's going to get worse in the next 4 years. All I know is whatever happens, I pivot. So right now, the challenges are higher interest rates make it harder to pencil the numbers out. When I work with somebody, we come up with what are your benchmark returns that you want for ever look at a deal. What are the benchmark returns you need to have? And then we start analyzing the deals. Life gets pretty simple. It's either yes or no. I don't want people looking for a good deal. What is a good deal? Is that 14% cash on cash return? Is that a 20% internal rate of return? What's a good deal for you? And we go through. The next challenge is that prices for existing self-storage are still high. Yes, cap rates have gone up, which lowers the price of self-storage. But with interest rates going up, it's still a relatively expensive asset class. The third challenge is the construction costs have gone up. Up until 2019, 2020, on almost all of the projects, like I say, I was a GC, but we acted like the construction managers. We would sign the contract with the building fabricator. We would sign the contract with the plumber and the erector, the building system, and we kind of direct the process with a good team, an engineer, an architect, and so forth. But around 2020, banks started requiring us to have GCs. So what I was building in 2019 for $50 a foot, I was all of a sudden getting bids at 100, 130 a foot. And with higher interest rates, it just wasn't working. So I had to figure out how to solve that problem. But whatever's currently going on, you find a fix or an adjustment in your strategy for that problem and challenge and move forward. So basically started my own little construction company. I hired someone with a national certification as a general contractor, and we get approved state by state as we go, and we do our projects. And I don't market nationally, but in the little world that I have online, and people I coach and people that follow me online, we work with some of them too. So the economy now is challenged. We'll have to look at a lot more deals than we ever did before. And we end up walking from more deals than we ever did before. But there's still a lot of opportunity out there.
Sure. Well, let's go into trends. You mentioned a couple things that I thought were interesting. First of all, the trend that I'm seeing lately is the flex space. Like it
Mhm.
seems like there's been a lot of people wanting to get on the show lately who are focused on flex. But then you talked about automation and self storage. Is there anything else like you're seeing trend wise?
Well, it's funny. I leased flex space in starting in 89 through 93. I worked for a developer who did retail development in flex space. And basically his flex space was retail buildings just with warehouse in the back. They look the same. That's a great asset class. Reason a lot of storage people are drawn to it right now is that currently one of the trends is what's called dynamic pricing. Technology and software improved. Our operating systems today can literally go out and scrape what's going on in our trade area or our market area. Our trade area is typically whatever 3 to 5 miles. Market area would be the MSA we're in. And we can see what our competitors are charging and to some degree make assumptions on how full they are. And then we can see how full we are. So, for example, if I've got 50 10 by 10s and my standard price is $100, we're at 70% occupied on those 10 by 10s. The pricing that shows up on our website will be much lower than the $100. If I only have 3 left and my competitors are very full and not discounting, that same $100 might go out for 120, 130. So we've got this dynamic pricing is now a trend that goes on in our area. So in the old days, I could look within accurately, I could pinpoint what my net operating income was going to be in 5 because we would average 3% a year, 4% a year price increases. I knew what inflation was. So I knew what my net operating income would be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. That's different with dynamic pricing. The stability of the cash flow from flex space, because you're pretty well defined by your leases, is attracting people who are doing self storage to flex space. And it's also, I know a number of people I've worked with who are doing mixed use developments where they have boat and RV, self storage, and flex space. So that's one trend I see going on. The construction of it's very similar, although there's an office component. So that's one trend that I see. I see dynamic pricing as a trend that a lot of people are embracing and using. And I see a lot of people also pitting for boat and RV at the moment because there's so much unmet demand. It's very similar. It's like a niche in a niche. It's a niche inside the storage space. It's a different dynamics going on, different demand drivers happening, but it's a good project going on. I'll tell you something interesting. I started tracking this on my second portfolio I put together. The one back in the late in 1999, 2004, we ended up selling real quick, got unsolicited offer from private REIT, and we ended up selling what we put together. And I came back out in 2008 and began to put the next portfolio together. And for whatever reason, I was tracking what my gross income is per full-time employee. As I started analyzing new deals, I wanted to try to figure out a methodology for how many people I'd need to hire. And when I first started doing this around 2010, 2012, I was averaging $250 of income per full-time employee. As technology got better, our operating systems got better, kiosks came in 2019, I was getting $385,000 of gross income per full-time employee. So that's a trend in the storage industry. Technology and automation is reducing the number of employees that you have to have. So those are just a few of the trends.
Right. Wow, that's a huge difference just over time.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
What we saw is I could see when in the month our leases were happening. Every facility is different, but we might have a facility that in the second and third week of the month from Tuesday to the third. So we would have a kiosk there. If anybody need to pay a bill or rent a unit, they could do it automatically just by being there or online. And we would put that manager in another facility. I would send that manager out to do marketing in the area. And we ended up being able to have less employee using
Sure.
technology.
Yeah, it's amazing what kind of impact some of those. I'm guessing that a lot of the mom and pops that you might be acquiring, implementing that type of technology doesn't even occur to them.
No, what we see time and time again are people who get very complacent with their cash flow. They don't raise rents like they could. They will work rather than somebody gets behind, they'll work with them and let them kind of drip in a little bit, not wanting to lose customer, whereas I want to lose that customer and replace them with someone who can pay. So we see just a lot of mismanagement maybe, or just getting complacent with their cash flow and not running it like a business. The mortgages, there's so few variable in that net operating income that if you keep your rent on average, you can't do it rent a higher percentage than your operating expenses, that gap compounds. And that's where the wealth and self storage is created. And I'm surprised how many like mom and pop owners don't have a clue what their income increases as a percentage over their operating expenses. Don't even look at it.
Well, we're going to change the topic just slightly. With all of your experience, can you tell me your biggest mistake and what you learned from it?
Well, that would be hard to do because I make a lot of mistakes. Still do. Just ask my wife. But I've never done a transaction where I wouldn't do something different. But probably the biggest mistake I made is a pretty simple one. I got emotionally attached to a deal and tried to make the deal work. And I knew that the average, I don't need to be in a high income area, but what I've learned from this deal is whatever the area, like in Louisville, whatever the average income is in Louisville, I want to be the median or a little above it. At one below it. But I got excited about doing the deal. The guy who developed this park was putting the land in the deal. And anyway, I got all emotionally attached. And the income in that trade area was a red flag, but I went on and did the deal anyway. And learn the hard way, you don't do that. The difference is with the lower the income, the average household income, the shorter the length of stay. So if I'm averaging 46 months in all my other properties in a market area, 42 to 46 months average length of stay, and I go in an area the income's lower, the average stay might be, 8 or 12. And so when we were building this thing, I would have to list the same unit 2 or 3 times before I would get to a break-even point. Biggest mistake I ever made.
Have you ever done a deal that in the end you thought would have been, if we're using a baseball analogy, it was going to be a single, but it ended up being a home run?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, first of all, I never shoot for home run. I really don't. I try to get singles and doubles. And if you do that, you'll be doing great. But the home runs I've gotten, I didn't know when we closed on them they were going to be home runs. But absolutely have. Absolutely have. Probably the biggest home run was a deal I did in 2012. And when we bought a big facility, big, huge facility. And when we bought it, it was generating $86,000 of income, gross income a month. And quickly we got that up to 95, 1,000. And within a few years, we were getting 120, 125,000. We added U-Haul, an additional income source. We just started doing price increases and cutting the management, cutting the, back then, the yellow pages was the big deal. When we bought it, the guy had a $50,000 a year yellow page contract. That was up. We cut that off and started using all online and marketing. I think we bought that for 6.4 million. We were able to refinance a few years later and appraised at 10. And then quickly we sold it a couple years after for about 13 and a half, almost 14, somewhere between there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that had
So
to
it was a
make you
home
smile.
run, but I didn't know when we closed on it.
Right.
I still get scared every time I close a deal. I still get nervous.
Well, then you know you're alive.
That's right.
Just remind everybody again, it is creating wealth through self-storage.com, creating wealth through self-storage.com. You can learn a lot more information there. There's a lot of great resources. But before we jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode, Mark, is there a topic you wish we would have hit on here today?
If you're doing small storage, 1,000 square feet or less, 1 or 2 story self storage, having a hard time getting the numbers to work, especially on the construction side, reach out to me. We're bringing in 75 ish, depending on where and what you're building. We have developed a process over the years, particularly in the design approval process that saves a lot of money, and on the construction process, saving money, utilizing the building fabricators and what they can provide.
Sure. If you're ready, sir, we'll jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode.
Okay, great.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
Well, I don't know about all real estate investors. I'll just tell you the lies that I see quite a bit in the storage space, working with people. And it's usually one or the other extreme. Very often, usability report will come back and say, you're probably going to absorb your new built space at 1,500 square feet a month. And they will tell themselves, well, I know how to get it up to 2,200 to 3,000. That's one lie. The other lie is that they have to know every single thing before they do their first deal. That's also not true.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I didn't get it in my, just like you were talking about. A lot of commercial real estate agents in particular don't invest in the asset in this as an asset and grow wealth that way. I was in my mid 30s and boy, I didn't have any money then. I wish I'd done it 10 years earlier.
Do you have a book recommendation?
Well, this might sound strange, but I read a chapter in a little book every single morning. And I'm surprised how many people don't know about this book, but it was written in 1910 by Wallace Wattles called The Science of Getting Rich. And it helps me create a powerful mindset to go out and do what needs to be done every day.
And then finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
Well, there's a lot of tools today. Probably recently, the most time saving and cost effective tool I've used is a subscription service to Radius Plus. I can literally almost any address in the country and plug in this thing, and I can set what parameters I want on my trade area size. I can see score, maybe not be exact, but it enough information to know if I want to continue looking at an opportunity. Gives me a foot per capita, gives me average median income, and then there's a competitor list where I can see prices that their algorithms have scraped from the websites. I can put the average price for climate control 5x5 has been over the last 12 months almost anywhere in the country. It has saved me a ton of time in determining if I want to focus on a market or not.
One last time, creating wealth through selfstorage.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. Really appreciate your time, Mark. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate hearing that.